There was no band, no baja, no barat, just a small circle of family friends who had gathered at Abdul Salam's house in the small South Kashmir village of Kadar one autumn evening in 2005 to witness the marriage of his stepdaughter, Shabira Kuche. The celebration was austere. A few dates were handed out to the guests after the village cleric solemnized the wedding. There was no singing of the kind traditional in Kashmiri weddings, nor drummers, or even the obligatory feast. Then, as dusk fell, the groom and bride walked out of the house and disappeared into the darkness alone. From his home in Changamanga, some 30 kilometers southwest of the Pakistani city of Lahore, that groom, Sajid Saifullah Jatt, some people know him as Sajid Lamra or Sajid the Lame, others as Sajid Kausar, is believed to be commanding the Lashkar-e-Taiba's long jihad in Kashmir. From his home, Sajid is believed to have given the instructions that led to the killing of 26 tourists in Pahalgam this week. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of The Print Explorer. For those of you watching this program for the first time, I'm Praveen Swami, a contributing editor to The Print. Today, I'll be taking you on a journey into the genesis and the backstory of the organization responsible for the massacre of the tourists in Pahalgam. An organization called the Lashkar-e-Taiba, which also uses the brand name the Resistance Front. And as I said, the groom who married that day in Kulgam is believed to have ordered and planned the slaughter in Pahalgam. His story helps us understand what keeps the Lashkar's terror production line running. This massacre isn't, of course, the only major operation the Lashkar has carried out in Kashmir. From the killings of 36 Sikh villagers in Chitti Singhpura back in 2000 to 2611 to bomb strikes in many Indian cities, the terrorist group has arguably been responsible for more violence than any other operating against India. To understand how it's been able to do this, you have to engage with the organization's extraordinary history, its ties to the Pakistan military, and its heritage in the ashes of partition. Late in the 1970s, Peshawar was a crucible for the global jihad. Fighters and ideologues from dozens of Islamist movements from across the Arab world, mujahideen from Afghanistan and the Pashtun borderlands, cash and spies from the Central Agency, all of these things were being melded together into the inferno of the war against the Soviet Union. The interesting thing was, even though Pakistan's inter-services intelligence was at the cutting edge of organizing the Afghan jihad, there were no Pakistanis or Pakistani organizations with a major role in it. Even though ideological groups in Pakistan, like the Jamaat-e-Islami and its founder Abul Ala Maududi, had laid the foundations for the idea of the Islamic State and the modern political conception of jihad, the milieu of the global jihadist movement at that stage was overwhelmingly Arab. There was no Pakistani Osama bin Laden, for example, which was, looking back, a little odd. To be clear, Pakistan had long experience of using covert warfare against India in Kashmir. In 1947-1948, Pakistan had armed and equipped tribal groups as well as demobilized soldiers in an effort to seize Kashmir. They used the slogan of jihad. There were sabotage groups operating with Islamabad's support in the 1950s and 1960s. They also used the slogan of jihad. And the 1965 war saw Pakistan make yet another bid for Kashmir using irregular forces. And that was followed by the sponsorship of jihadist groups like Al-Fatah. Yet Pakistan's generals had, wisely in my opinion, kept the jihadis out of forming any kind of serious groups within their own country. This was about to change in the wake of the Afghan jihad, as a generation of young officers around General Muhammad Ziaul Haq began to think that what had been done in Afghanistan could be done in Kashmir too. The birth of the Lashkar is generally dated to 1984, when Zaki-ur-Rahman Lakwi, then an obscure activist of an extreme wing of the Ahle Hadith sect, later key organizer of 2611, assembled a small group of volunteers to travel and fight in Afghanistan. The next year, 1985 or maybe 1986, two professors of religion at the Lahore Engineering University, Hafiz Muhammad Saeed and Zafar Iqbal, formed what they called the Jamaatud Dawa. The small group initially focused on dawa, that is, missionary work, but went on to merge with Lakhvi's armed cell. The inspiration for this merger is believed to have come from Abdullah Azzam, a famous Palestinian Jordanian jihadist who was Osama bin Laden's mentor and eventually assassinated. This new group called itself the Markaz Dawa wal Irshad, or MDI, or Center for Dawa, Center for Proselytization. It set up its first armed training camp sometime in 1986 called the Lashkar-e-Taiba in eastern Afghanistan's Paktia with the help of Ahle Hadith clerics in the region. Later, it established another camp, the Maskar Aqsa, in Afghanistan's Kunar province, just across the border from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. There is some reason to believe Azzam recruited the first trainers for these camps from among the Arab jihadists fighting with Osama bin Laden. Like other organizations fighting in Afghanistan, the MDI profited from a landscape awash with donations from rich Arab Islamists as well as Western intelligence agencies. But in essence, the MDI was seen by the ISI as the Pakistan's own loyal proxy jihadist group to do with as it willed. The beginnings of the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan in 1988 neatly dovetailed with the rise of a crisis in Kashmir. In 1987, the National Congress Alliance was alleged to have rigged elections to the Legislative Assembly, creating uproar among opposition. Following those elections, a steady stream of young people, often affiliated with the Jamaat-e-Islami or campaign agents for its candidates or other religious right-wing groups, began to cross the line of control into Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. As violence within Kashmir grew very slowly in those first years, so did the flow of volunteers. For many young Kashmiri radicals, the triumph of the Afghan mujahideen was an inspiration. After all, if farmers and peasants from Kandahar and Helmand could defeat a superpower, why could they not defeat much poorer, weaker India? The conventional wisdom has it that the first training camps were established by organizations like the Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front, later joined by the Hizbul Mujahideen, basically ethnic Kashmiri groups. But the Lashkar was actually among the first to establish training camps in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. The Baitul Mujahideen in Muzaffarabad received its first trainees around the end of 1990. Four other major training camps came up around Muzaffarabad: the Maskar-e-Ummul Qura, Maskar Abdullah bin Masood, Maskar Aqsa, and the Maskar Taiba. Later, another camp was set up in Sindh called the Markaz Muhammad bin Qasim, and there were satellite camps in a number of smaller towns and cities. At the center of this constellation lay the MDI's headquarters in Muridke, some 30 kilometers from Lahore, a sprawling 200-acre campus. The Muridke campus boasted of a number of charitable and for-profit activities, including a huge madrasa, residential facilities for its scholars and staff, a mosque, a hospital, a market, an iron foundry, a woodworking facility, even a swimming pool and stables. There have long been rumors that Osama bin Laden made a generous early donation that helped with developing these facilities, and he is reputed to have stayed at the MDI campus on visits he made to Pakistan prior to 1992, when he was officially banned from visiting. The Lashkar's own literature claims that it carried out its first mission in Kashmir in January 1990, ambushing a jeep carrying Indian Air Force personnel towards Srinagar airport. There's a bit of a mystery around this claim because Indian prosecutors have attributed the attack to the Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front led by Muhammad Yasin Malik, who is now facing the death penalty. According to one Lashkar commander interviewed by the journalist Azmat Abbas, the Indian Air Force was chosen, and I quote, because it was instrumental in flying the Indian Army into Kashmir through hundreds of sorties between October 27 and November 17 in 1947. This attack was our way of saying that now it was the time for the Indian Air Force to fly their army out of Kashmir. Like I said, there's a mystery around this claim and possibly some further work to be done on links between the Lashkar and groups like the JKLF back in that 1990 period. Now, back in that period, the MDI segmented its activities with the main organization focused on proselytization, especially among the poor in southern Punjab. The feudal order in Punjab has been far more durable than in India, and there were large numbers of young, prospectless youth the MDI reached out to with its message of religious revival. Hafiz Saeed explained the emphasis on dawa in these terms. Islam propounds both dawa and jihad, he said. Both are equally important and inseparable. Since our life revolves around Islam, therefore, both dawa and jihad are essential. We cannot prefer one over the other. The truth, however, was that these dawa activities helped the Lashkar draw a regular flow of recruits from poor communities in southern Punjab who made up the rank and file of its fighters in Kashmir. Though many mid level and senior people in the Lashkar-e-Taiba were relatively well educated with school and even university educations, typically you'll find its rank and file are school dropouts. The Lashkar-e-Taiba, for its part, the armed wing, focused on improving its fighting capabilities, often hiring former Pakistan army personnel to provide a higher level of instruction than comparable ethnic Kashmiri-dominated jihadist groups had. It also became a magnet for small numbers of jihadists from elsewhere in India outside Kashmir who were drawn to the movement, often former members of the Students' Islamic Movement of India, looking for means to turn their ideological beliefs into action. From 1999, the Lashkar truly arrived on the jihadist stage in Kashmir. It used Fidain strikes as a theatrical spectacle to demonstrate the piety, commitment, and military skills of its cadre. The earliest of its missions involved a Fedayeen attack on the Border Security Forces sector headquarters in Bandipora in northern Kashmir. A deputy inspector general of the BSF was killed in that attack. Two Fedayeen were claimed to have also been killed in the attack, but their bodies were not recovered, leading to suspicion that they might have escaped after carrying out their mission. A series of similar attacks followed on Indian security installations, the homes of leaders, and even hotels, public facilities. One Lashkar jihadist, Masroor Ahmad, told an interviewer that his unit was involved in at least 10 encounters with the army in Kashmir during their one-year tour of duty. I quote, he said, "I will keep going back to Kashmir until I too receive martyrdom." The scholar Maryam Abu Zahab explains that these kinds of attacks with their dramatic character and media profile earned the Lashkar generous support from donors and also expanded the pool of willing recruits. Faced with Fedayeen attacks, she noted, Indian forces were often forced to demolish their own buildings to kill the attackers, further adding to the public spectacle of humiliation. For many families in southern Punjab, we see in Lashkar literature, these attacks were a source of pride where their sons, often uneducated and prospectless, received some form of religious legitimacy and purpose. The Lashkar also typically paid all those killed in its campaign, just like an army would give a pension to a soldier fallen in combat. Lashkar units, in addition to attacking the army, were also the spear arm of a relentless war of ethnic cleansing south of the Pir Panjal range, conducting multiple large-scale massacres of Hindu villagers from Doda to Rajouri and Poonch. The idea appears to have been to force Hindus to move south of the Jhelum River, bringing about a de facto partition between Jammu and Kashmir's religious geographical zones. The organization was also involved, as I mentioned, in mass killings in the Kashmir Valley itself. Muzammil Bhatt, who played a central role in organizing the 2611 attacks, physically led the unit which massacred 35 Sikhs at the village of Chitti Singhpura. Late in 2001, following the attack on Parliament House by the Jaish-e-Mohammed, Pakistan was forced to ban the Lashkar. Inside months, though, the Lashkar was restructured, with the MDI emerging under a new name, or rather the old name of the proselytizing arm, the Jamaat-ud-Dawa, Hafiz Saeed resigned on paper as the Amir of the Lashkar, the armed wing, thus distancing himself from any violent activities. And the Lashkar was now characterized as a purely Kashmiri organization with Kashmiri leadership. Though the Lashkar maintained a somewhat lower profile in Kashmir after 2003, when a ceasefire went into force along the line of control, it continued to stage significant numbers of attacks and operations. After 2003, the organization also began routing cadre to support the Afghan Taliban in their fight against the United States led International Security Assistance Force. In 2008, Lashkar terrorists are believed to have helped the Taliban overrun an American base in Wanat, part of the Nuristan province. The Lashkar is also thought to have helped carry out a July 2008 car bombing of the Indian embassy in Kabul and a February 2010 Fedayeen attack on Kabul guest houses which were hosting Indian workers. Events in Pakistan, meanwhile, gave the Lashkar new challenges but also new opportunities. In 2007, the Islamist clerics Abdul Aziz and Abdul Rashid led a movement against General Pervez Musharraf's military regime from their mosque in Islamabad called the Lal Masjid. Many jihadists from different groups supported the rebellion. The country for a while seemed like it would slip into anarchy. There were bombings, vigilante violence, and even cases of the kidnapping of Chinese nationals. The ISI turned to the Lashkar to rein in its cadre and make sure they didn't join in this chaos. Hafiz Saeed used this opportunity to establish that his organization was a completely loyal, disciplined proxy of the military. The organization again proved its utility in 2008 after General Parvez Ashfaq Kayani took over from General Musharraf as army chief. General Kayani decided to overturn General Musharraf's efforts at détente with India. The 26/11 attacks took place soon after he came to office and destroyed the India-Pakistan peace process. The attacks elevated the Lashkar's status to the level of other transnational terror outfits like Al-Qaeda. The Lashkar had grown from a Kashmir-focused operation into one that was waging war with all of India. Even though the Lashkar was banned again by Pakistan under pressure from the West, its loyalty to the ISI ensured it was well protected. Pakistan, for example, deployed government forces outside the Lashkar's Qadsiya mosque in Lahore, and ISI agents are believed to have ridden shotgun in Hafiz Saeed's vehicles to make sure he was well protected. Similarly, government forces provided security to the complex at Muridke, while plainclothes agents with hair-cropped, cradling machine guns patrolled the faux Greek villas of the movement's leaders. So, despite the ban, the Lashkar remained the preeminent jihadist group in Kashmir itself, operating in plain sight of the world. For the Lashkar in Kashmir, 26/11 was a turning point. It was now established as the preeminent jihadist group more lethal than even the Jaish-e-Mohammed. Yes, it was under pressure, but it also saw opportunity. The status it had would be capitalized on by a group of commanders who patiently helped the organized survive through the lean years General Musharraf had imposed on them. Figures like Sajid Jat, the Kulgam commander and bridegroom I began this episode with, developed very close ties with local Kashmiris. Their learning was that violence itself could not overthrow India in Kashmir. Instead, a mass movement was needed, backed by the Lashkar's guns and ideology. Among the key figures in this process was Muhammad Abbas Sheikh, the 1975 born son of a small peasant who would help found what is now called the Resistance Front, the social media savvy organization that the Lashkar today uses as a proxy. Abbas Sheikh was part of a poor, large family. He had 9 siblings and dropped out of school before completing his primary education. He was married at a young age to Rashida Sheikh and soon a father. Abbas provided for his family by working as a roadside tailor in the town of Kaimo. His real calling, though, however, wasn't stitching pieces of cloth. Abbas's family, you see, had impeccable jihadist credentials. Ibrahim Sheikh, Abbas's oldest brother, was killed in 1996 while serving with the Hizbul Mujahideen. Another brother, Ibrahim Sheikh, would die 10 years later while fighting with the Lashkar-e-Taiba. Nasima Banu, Abbas's oldest sister, had a son, Asif Sheikh, who was killed by Indian forces in 2008. Tausif Sheikh, the son of another sister, Nasima Banu, also joined the Lashkar. From 2004 on, Abbas served multiple preventive detention terms in prison, including for murder and kidnapping, but was never successfully prosecuted for a crime. For him, a police officer familiar with the case told me, prison served as a kind of higher school where he learned jihadist ideology and developed a network of trust. Abbas ended up playing a key role in helping the Lashkar Sajid Jat to embed himself within the community in South Kashmir. Sajjad's relationship with Shabira Kuche, who was 21, relatively old to be unmarried in the context of her peasant community, may well have developed as a result of an introduction by Abbas Sheikh. It certainly reflected the growing integration of the Lashkar into South Kashmir's population, particularly among young radicals. Left in the care of a distantly related family after the death of her own parents, Shabira's stepfather, Abdul Salam, had been unable or unwilling, I don't know, to find a respectable match. Abbas helped solve this problem, at once tying the family into the Lashkar by kinship. Early in 2007, by then pregnant, Shabira moved to Yaripura in South Kashmir, where Abbas had arranged a safe house for her to live with her new husband. This arrangement was, however, eventually betrayed to the police. Later that year, Sajid and Shabira fled first to Nepal and then made their way to Pakistan, back to his family home near Changamanga near Lahore. They left behind their 15-day-old child. There's a fascinating story about that child it's worth recounting parenthetically. In 2016, 9-year-old Umar Raja Afaq would visit his father and mother for the first and last time. Lived for some months at Sajid's family-owned dairy farm in the village near Lahore. Alienated perhaps by his biological father's Punjabi-speaking milieu and new siblings he could not relate to, the child chose to come back to South Kashmir and is now a student. Across Kashmir, meanwhile, Lashkar Jihad commanders like Sajid were laying foundations for an Islamist mass mobilization. In 2006, protesters targeted an alleged Srinagar sex work ring, claiming that it was being propped up by the Indian military. Then, the next year, the rape and murder of a Kashmir teenager provided Islamists with fodder to campaign against migrant workers, who they alleged were part of an Indian plot to bring about demographic change. And in early 2008, an Anantnag school teacher was attacked after a video of a group of his students dancing to pop music was circulated. India, Kashmir's new Islamists argued, was a threat not just territorial to Kashmir, but to its very culture and religious identity. In 2010, these mobilizations exploded into violence for the first time after the government granted land use rights to the Amarnath shrine. Islamist patriarch Sayyid Ali Shah Gilani claimed this was part of a conspiracy to settle Hindus in the region. I caution my nation, he warned, that if we don't wake up in time, India and its stooges will succeed and we will be displaced. That's exactly the same language the TRF has now used in the claims it's released about its motives for attacking the tourists in Pahalgam. Abbas, police records show, played a key role in organizing these street battles between mobs and police. In 2010, he even led a mob that burnt down government offices in Kaimo. As in the past, he went to prison, only to re-emerge each time with an expanded circle of contacts. Locked in intense political competition, the governments of Chief Ministers Omar Abdullah and then Mehbooba Mufti proved unwilling to take on the Islamists head-on. They were fearful of alienating the religious rights ranks of supporters in southern Kashmir and losing a small but vital chunk of the electorate. Even though Sajid had fled Kashmir, his successors grew into cult figures because they were able to operate unchallenged in rural areas. The burial of Bhavalpur-born Abdul Rahman, also known as Abu Qasim, drew tens of thousands of people. Two villages fought pitched battles with stones for the honor of burying him in their village graveyards. His successor, Abu Dujana, like Sajid, married to a local woman called Ruqayya Dar, appeared at the 2016 funeral of jihadist social media icon Burhan Wani, to the kind of hysterical applause you'd normally get for Bollywood stars or film actors. Following Burhan's funeral, a popular insurrection broke out across southern Kashmir, sweeping aside the Indian government. It wasn't until 2018 that some order was restored. Then, in 2019, came the Jaish-e-Mohammed's attack on Pulwama, which India responded to by abrogating Kashmir's constitutional status. Even as rumors circulated that India would respond to Pulwama with a genocide or mass violence, jihadist commanders prepared themselves to address these new circumstances. Remember, if anything happens to Kashmiris living outside Kashmir, Hizbul Mujahideen Operations Chief Riaz Naiku warned, we will kill non-local labourers living in the valley. In the following weeks, labourers and truck drivers were shot dead anyway, sparking off a massive exodus from the valley. Things didn't work out quite according to the jihadist plan though. The Indian Air Force strikes on Balakot in 2019, which followed the Pulwama attack, convinced Pakistan Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa to again scale down support for the Lashkar. Even though Pakistan believed it had had the better of the crisis over Balakot, it still felt that continuing frictions on the line of control would choke the country of resources and kill off its economy. Thus, General Bajwa turned off the pipeline of support to the Lashkar-e-Taiba. For the next several years, the jihad slowly wound down. The killings in Pahalgam might show that tap has been opened again by a new army chief, Asim Munir, who's determined to avenge Pakistan's humiliations in Balochistan and perhaps wants to put pressure on India in Kashmir. The attacks have shown that the Lashkar has the resources, the will and determination to renew its war on demand. The one question that remains to be answered is if India can find the means to deter Pakistan's generals from doing what they seem determined to do. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of The Print Explorer.